we go. And we'll get going. So in a moment, we will take a minute to introduce everyone. Before we do that, I'm going to share, please, throughout the meetings today, if you could raise your hand, please, because we want you to actively participate. You can do that by looking at the toggle bar at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on where it is. You can also just speak out if you have a question. We don't want anyone to feel like they're held back from participating in any way. I'm going to promote a few more people into here as attendee or panelists. There we go. They should be bumping in here. All right, so for my committee members, as well as OPI staff, if you're in the main room, will you please identify yourselves in the chat? This will help us with our attendance records, and it will also help us get to know one another. If you could also rename yourselves, depending on how it is set up. Good morning, Dr. Mergel. You can do that by finding your own screen, clicking the three dots, and then renaming so that we can identify you as you're speaking also, because that little bubble pops up for us. So thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to continually, I have more committee members jumping in here. So I'm going to make sure I promote them in here as panelists. All right, so this meeting and all of our meetings will be recorded, especially for those who are not in attendance today. We want to make sure they have the opportunity to access the information so that they can participate fully in the negotiated rulemaking process. Please speak clearly, and if you need clarity on everything or need to repeat yourself, we might ask just so that we can fully understand and that you can have full participation both ways. If possible, I know that we had Lynn, I believe, say that her camera could not work during this, but if possible, if you could keep your camera on, just so that we know that we are engaging with one another in this fine work we're doing today. All right, so the whole purpose of this, hello, Carrie, thanks for joining. Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Nora. We'll get there. So we are going to provide our new members here, since we are just commencing, the Math Standards Negotiated Rulemaking Committee with an introduction to the continuing work of the committee. So why are we here? What is the work going to look like? And what are the rules that you are all helping negotiate? As we go through, we will talk about the process, the timeline. We'll have the Assistant Superintendent Christy Mock Stutz here help us explain negotiated rulemaking, as well as Julie Mergel, who is our expert in negotiated rulemaking for the agency. And then we'll have the opportunity later on to discuss the process of what the task force, the experts in the math field, put together for us to come to consensus on at our rulemaking sessions. Okay, so we are going to begin here in a moment with brief introductions of the OPI team. Then we will have the opportunity for our negotiated rulemaking committee members to share a little bit about themselves so that we can get to know you in this work. We will go through negotiated rulemaking 101, so some common questions and answers about this process. We will have an overview of all of the pieces as well as next steps. All right, so I'm going to have our different OPI staff members briefly just introduce themselves, as well as introducing Diane Groves. So part of the negotiated rulemaking process is ensuring that we have a facilitator that is not employed by the OPI and is just an impartial party to make sure, as we go through consensus and rulemaking, that she can support us in this work in the best way possible. So we have Diane Groves. There we go.
Good morning. I'm Diane Groves, and I actually live just over the border in Idaho. And being a facilitator is my professional work, so I do that work across the West. I have a graduate degree in organizational development focused on group dynamics and facilitation, including conflict resolution. And probably half of my work is within the public school system somehow. So I help with contract negotiations. I might be helping a high school manage a change. It could be boundaries, in addition to helping education systems engage with their public around a number of different types of issues. Could be even a budget shortfall. And beyond that, the other half of my work is probably in public lands management and engaging the public with the land managers, whether it's Forest Service or Bureau of Land Management. And it's my life's purpose to help people work together, hear each other, and make decisions by consensus. And so I'm delighted to have an opportunity to be a facilitator in a legislative process that I think is it's quite unusual for the public to actually have a chance to have an influence within that process, and beyond that, to help build awareness for those who are not part of the negotiated rulemaking committee. So if you choose me, I'll be so delighted to serve with you. And thanks so much for having me here this morning.
All right. Thank you for that. I'll introduce myself briefly. I am Marie Judish, the Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning for the Office of Public Instruction. I have been grateful to be a part of this process for the last 6 months or so now. And in this realm, I get to oversee assessment, content standards, CTE, as well as assessment for the state. So it's a really nice all-encompassing piece of how these pieces fit together, and content standards is a big part of all of the rest of the work. All right, I'm going to kick it off to Katrina Engeldrum, our math coordinator.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Katrina Engeldrum. I am the math coordinator at OPI. I signed on in September, so I've just been kind of helping towards the tail end of the development process of these standards. But my experience prior to that has been a classroom teacher in Montana since 2014. So I'm very excited about the work that we're all doing, and I'm excited to see this process continue on.
All right, and to Dr. Julie Mergel, our Chief Program Officer.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Julie. I'm the Chief Program Officer here at the agency and get to oversee all of the different programs from special ed to assessment to school nutrition, all the different things here at the agency that involve not HR or finance or legal, but the other components. And so it is great to be with you all. And I would say that I'm super excited to be negotiating in this content because I'm a former math teacher. So I'm super excited to actually be in the one area that's one of my passions. So it's good to see each of you.
All right. Rob Stutz, our Chief Legal and Deputy Superintendent, could not join us today. He is busy with other work, but he will at some point join us so that you can get to see him and introduce him. I will introduce Christy Mock Stutz, our Assistant Superintendent, who's also been guiding us in this process.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here as well. And you'll hear from me later, sort of talking about the negotiated rulemaking process. But I also am a longtime teacher, and some of my favorite people are math teachers, although I come from the social studies and English language arts background. But I'm happy to be here and be part of this. I think this negotiation is an important part of our educational process, and it's just great to be part of a group of interested people who are considerate and careful and excited about this process. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you, Christy. And I did want to point out, I know there's some confusion about some of our orientation days. And I want you to know the first hour of all of this is the same. And some of you are serving on both committees. We have Carrie Fisher, who will introduce herself. So you are welcome, even if you're sitting on world languages, to jump in at tomorrow's point, and we'll make sure that we clear all this up for you. Either way, please communicate in the chat with me and we'll make sure you get the right information. But the first hour is the same either way. So thank you for your patience and understanding on that. And we'll make sure to clear those pieces up. So with that, we do have some of our committee members with us today, and I want to give you the opportunity to share now your name as well as your role as it relates to math instruction in Montana or education in general, and reasons that you would chose to apply to the negotiated rulemaking committee for content revisions. With that, let me jump down here. All right, I know we have Brooke Tuft on to start our day. Brooke, do you want to take a moment and share about yourself?
Okay, my name's Brooke Tuft. I moved to Montana from Maryland 4 years ago. My degree is in medical research and technology. And when I was taking the classes, I was also a tutor. I have 7 grandchildren and 3 granddaughters. Math is a passion of mine, along with chemistry. And I've always involved myself in what the kids were doing with schoolwork. And I thought this was a great opportunity to get more involved.
Thank you for that, Brooke. We're happy to have you here today. Next, I have Carrie Fisher from Belgrade.
Carrie, I hope you guys can hear me. It looks like my picture is frozen. I don't know what
We can hear you.
But I am moving. I'm not just sitting there. I've been involved in schools for over 20 years. I started at a rural K-8 school, and now I'm in Belgrade as their director of finance. And I saw this opportunity come up and thought that it might be interesting to get involved and see how it all works. Being on the other end and kind of seeing how it comes into schools. I've never really seen behind the scenes, and I thought this might be an interesting opportunity to take part in.
Thank you so much for that, Carrie. We're happy to have you. And making sure that no one else is jumping in here. Okay, perfect. Next, I see we have Kathy is online. She is from Butte. Kathy, do you have a moment to introduce yourself? There she is. Hello. Oh, we can't hear you quite yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, sorry, I should know better than that. My name is Kathy Milo-Dragovich, and I live here in Butte. I am a retired educator. I am a taxpayer. I am a grandparent, and I'm a school trustee. And I got involved in this because it's just another layer of understanding how schools work. I've been most previously a literacy coach at the middle school. So I'm real interested in content area development. So that was why I got involved in this, just to, again, as other people have said, just to see how it all works. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We're glad to have you here today. And Lynn Ryder, I know her camera is not working, but she is in the room.
I am in the room. So I'm Lynn Ryder. I am a sixth grade mathematics teacher. I'm also a union president, and I teach graduate classes at Grand Canyon University. My doctorate is in data analysis.
Wonderful. We are glad to have you here today, Lynn. And then Carolyn, I do see you on the call, and I want to make sure you are in our world languages. You can introduce yourself here as well, because I know you will contribute to negotiated rulemaking in some way.
Okay, so yes, if this is the math one, I can wait. Is the language one tomorrow?
It is, but the information for the first hour or so will be the same, and you should have all the updated calendar invites. And if not, I'm going to double check everything today just to make sure.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful.
You want me to go ahead and introduce myself?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Yes. So I'm Carolyn Rushi. Born and raised in Montana from Wolf Point. I'm a member of the Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux tribe. I've been in education, mostly elementary, for 28 years, and I'm also the Billings Schools IPA elementary coach currently. I have a class 7, and that's one of the reasons I'm interested in the language committee. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Or Carolyn, at any point, you could also share and contribute to the negotiated rulemaking components as well. All right, we are going to get into what we're doing here and why we are here. And with that, I'm going to kick it to our Assistant Superintendent, Christy Mockstutz, and she's going to kind of bring us through the process of negotiated rulemaking and what it means for content standards.
Thanks, Marie. So negotiated rulemaking is a legislative mandate for all content standards here in Montana when the Board of Public Education approves amending, updating, reviewing them. We then start down the process of negotiated rulemaking. And this is a way for the public to have input on the public education rules and our content standards. And so that's the background of this negotiated rulemaking committee process. And so what we have for now, you're all working on the math standards, and we have some proposed rules that have been developed by a task force, and we'll talk more about that task force later on in this session. But just for you to know as a bit of background, the OPI has done some review of math standards. They spent time reviewing and looking at national standards, looking at what other states are doing in their content standards revision currently, as of today. And they had a task force review and craft proposed standards that you'll be looking at later for your discussion. And then we've come to the negotiated rulemaking process. So your job as a negotiated rulemaking committee is to review the rules and reach consensus, hopefully, on the amendments or changes in these proposed rules. Then we'll get into this in the next slide. Your role specifically is, once you've reached consensus, and hopefully you will reach consensus on all of these rule changes, you'll send that back to the superintendent, who will move it on to the Board of Public Education. So you can see here in this slide, it really talks about the different tasks that you are involved in as a negotiated rulemaking committee. So we have this, we've determined a need. We have some rules that need amended or revised. You'll be reviewing those. The superintendent has selected this committee, and we will be convening our committee in November. Today's orientation is just to sort of orient you in the process and let you know what information will be coming for you to review. So we're establishing that committee right now. Your responsibilities in the middle slide, you'll see, are to review these changes. You'll read the rules, you'll look at them. You might ask peers of yours or other interested persons, what they think about these rules. You will also be tasked with creating an economic impact survey, proposing some questions, discussing how these rule changes might impact schools financially and in their time. There may be some impact with these changes, and so you as a committee will spend time talking about that, and then you'll also help craft some questions and ideas for the OPI to send a survey out to stakeholders across the state to get their feedback. We'll then analyze those results, and then we will provide those recommendations and those survey results back to the superintendent. Once the superintendent receives your report, we will finalize an economic impact report, finalize your final standards recommendations, and then we will move it on probably to the next slide here. And that will move on to the Board of Public Education for their review. And so once you've completed your work is going to be over reviewing the standards, digging deep into the standards, talking about the standards, talking about their economic impact, talking about their time impact on schools as well. We're then going to send that off to the superintendent, who takes it to the Board of Public Education. She will share these recommendations with the Board of Public Education with the economic impact statement, that report. We will have, they will draft administrative rules, sort of a final draft for that, to the Board of Public Education, and then the Board of Education will take them and do their process. The Board of Education then will also have a public notice, and they will have a public hearing where people can come and give public comment to the Board of Education directly. They will also share this information with the Interim Education Committee. They will receive the written comments, and they will respond to comments, and they will then take their final action on these rules when they've received and gone through their process. We as well, one thing I didn't mention, in our negotiated rulemaking committee meetings, every time that we meet, it is a public meeting, and there is opportunity for public comment as well. So you will also potentially hear public comment during your negotiated rulemaking committee meetings as well, because they are public meetings and the public has the right to come and make public comment. So as you can see throughout this process, you're part of where you will hear public comment, you'll be talking about the rules, and you are making a recommendation for the superintendent to take to the Board of Public Education. Then the Board of Public Education will also have public comment. They will be the ultimate determiner whether they adopt these rules and what those rules look like in their final form, to then move into the administrative rules of Montana. And the next slide talks a little bit more about that in depth. This one is a longer slide, but it shows that we are the administrative agency, the Office of Public Instruction. So you are part of this first step here. It's this first step on this slide. You're part of this administrative agency, the OPI, working on the proposed rule changes that we will then take to the Board of Public Ed. The Board of Public Education then will submit the changes, the final changes, to the Secretary of State. They will then enter them into the administrative register. They will have their time for public comment. And then ultimately, these will get turned into administrative rules of Montana. The rules will be updated. And then the implementation of the rules will come back to the Office of Public Instruction, and we will be tasked with then supporting teachers, schools, administrators, students, and families in implementing these new rules. And so are there any questions about this part so far? I've done a little bit of talking right now. Any questions about this? All right, sounds good. The next slide shows the negotiated rulemaking roles. And again, I mentioned a lot of these people and groups. So these are just terms that you'll be hearing throughout our time together. We have the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Superintendent Arntzen. We have the BPEs, the Board of Public Education, the Negotiated Rulemaking Committee, as you all. In our negotiated rulemaking facilitator, we have our proposed facilitator, Diane. You met her earlier, and you will take action to approve her at our first meeting. The OPI, there, the Content Standards Revision Task Force. This is the group of experts that came together to craft the language of these rules that you all will be reviewing. And this is, you'll see a little bit more about that task force. You'll see the work that they've done. You're going to know that they are experts in their math content areas, how we worked through using our experts and the experts working together to craft these rules for you. You'll get a little bit more information on that later on in this orientation, but just know that there was a revision task force that worked very hard, and a lot of time was spent crafting these rules to be best for Montana students, teachers, and families. The Education Interim Committee is the legislative interim committee that meets between sessions. They meet every few months at the Capitol, and we, the Board of Public Education, will share this information with them for these content standards. And then our local school district boards of trustees, or the trustees, will implement these policies once they're finalized into the administrative rule, and then they will oversee the standards implementation in their districts. School boards are required to review their content standards and for accreditation purposes, and this will be part of that review for all school districts across Montana as well. All right, next slide. So one of your first tasks as a negotiated rulemaking committee when we meet in November will be to approve our facilitator. Once that is done, then our facilitator will take the lead and guide you through the negotiated rulemaking process. And we just wanted you to know that that is part of the process, and that'll be your first action as a group together. Next slide. Oh, go ahead. Ready to jump in? Yes, I think this is probably where we transition back to Marie.
Thanks, thank you, Christy, for that. And we will have an opportunity for questions and all that in just a moment also, but at any point, please raise your hand or say, oh, can you explain that a little bit more? Just so you know, in terms of communication, we will have all of the updated links, agendas, meeting minutes on the OPI webpage. I'll show you that in just a moment. We will also have the Google revision website, which this is where the task force has primarily been working from. We will make sure that in our next steps, you'll see that you will get a summary document of all of the work of the task force that includes the research, the process, the meeting dates, all of the details that the superintendent will have gone through to make sure that these are the rules that we're passing to you as the negotiated rulemaking committee members. So I will take a moment to show you where you can find this information on the website, because I think that will be important for your review as a team. The OPI website is opi.mt.gov. And when you're on the main page, because this is one of our big projects right now, you can scroll down and you will see standards revision information. All of this is being actively updated as we are just filled our negotiated rulemaking teams. You will see your names on there. We have a press release drafted and ready to go out to show your guys' commitments to this work. And you'll see the timeline and all the different revisions we have going on. We just finished up negotiated rulemaking for the English language proficiency standards. We are in mathematics and world languages together in our timeline, and then English language arts is at the very beginning of their timeline for negotiated or for revisions. So a few more details on what is negotiated rulemaking committee, and part of that is why did we have certain individuals fill certain roles? So within statute 20-7-101, which is our Montana Code annotated, the content standards are recommended by the superintendent of public instruction. Then they must go through this process. And part of that is including representatives from the following groups. Now, as we go through this, I want to note that these are representatives. We have no expectation of you representing every individual within that group. Obviously, if you're a school administrator, you will not have the same views as other school administrators, but we wanted to ensure that we tap into all of those because they are all such unique roles when it comes to education in Montana that have such valuable insight. So school district trustees, we have Kathy Milodragovich on here for that. School administrators, we have a few different members. Teachers, of course, the people who are in the classroom teaching these math content standards. School business officials like Carrie, who help us understand especially the economic impact of this, and they have such a different view of the educational world, but a very important one that they can help us understand those pieces. Parents, of course, and taxpayers. So even if you do not have a child within the school, you're a taxpayer and you're a contributing member to Montana. And we love that we have this public opportunity to be a part of the process. And with recent legislation through House Bill 338, they also added having a Montana tribe representative on all of our negotiated rulemaking committees. It is an important part, and we note that while we cannot have an individual from every single tribe, that this person is not expected to do that role, but as an individual that has that perspective and can encompass all of the different pieces and also have honor that it's not the same for everyone. So their individualism in that is very important. So why are we convening? Well, we must, because we want to make sure that these are vetted, that they go through the processes, that they have eyes on them, that they're understandable for the public. And all of the people that were selected could be significantly affected by the proposed rules. And as we look at that, one of those things that we mentioned briefly is also the economic impact statement. So not only will the rules change instruction, but it could also change the funding structures of schools. If we're making huge changes, it could be a very large economic impact, not only to financing, but also time and effort. And it could also be very little and minimal. We've had recent ones where the committee decided there wasn't an economic impact. It just depends on all of the different proposals and the work of the committee and what you decide as committee members. It is not up to the agency, it is up to the committee members. So one thing we'll discuss is consensus. So there's a lot of ways to look at consensus, but we wanted to take the moment to define it for the process of negotiated rulemaking. So we are working on a consensus-based model on the entire package. So we will break that out when we're in rulemaking on what are you coming to consensus to? What are the different packages that we have? Now, with that, when we come to consensus, the biggest part is if you have nothing wrong with it and we can move on, that's great. If you do dissent, and that's your right as a committee member, you just must offer a valid solution or proposal. So For example, if we are looking at a kindergarten math standard that talks about time and money, and that may be a new standard, you may say, I don't think it's appropriate to have kindergartners working to the second in time. That's not in the proposals. But for an example, you could be like, I think we should reevaluate where this is in terms of child development and understanding. And with that comes not only your individual skills and specialty knowledge, but we will make sure that you have the research to help support you in those decisions also. If consensus is reached on a rule, those individuals who are on the NRC and the individuals they represent can no longer oppose the rules once they continue through this process. So once we come to consensus, our facilitator, and if you choose Diane to do that, she does a very good job making sure that it is clear that this is what we are deciding on as a committee, and then we're going to move forward. We will have a big package of rules for math standards, and you will see that. So it's important that we make those decisions, not hastily, but thoughtfully, but also know that once they're made, are going to move on. Now, the economic impact statement. This is a statement that can be done through survey tools where we survey the field, whether it's school administrators or business officials and our teachers, just saying, hey, will this have an economic impact by changing the rules the way we have? So there's different elements that we have to consider this. The affected classes of persons. So if we look at the students, and depending on if we have English language learners or world language students, how it affects them, the actual financial cost and benefits of the proposed rules. Sometimes rules could be taken away in different areas, and it could actually be a benefit or vice versa. And also when we talk about cost, I want to note that sometimes the cost is worth it also by making improved rigorous standards for our students. The selection of proposed rules is if that has any impact, and then the efficient allocation of public and private resources. As we have Julie on here, Julie, do you mind? Do you have anything else that you would like to share with the committee? You are our economic impact expert on the slides today.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think what's really important on this piece is really understanding like the through line of the impact of the rules. So we have to be really thinking about, once we establish the rules, what do we want to know more information about, and seek that information from our stakeholders outside of our own group, so we can do surveys and get that information. But it's really important at that point that the team really get a good sense of what will be any of these changes, will there not be an economic impact. And so we've done surveys in the past and helped put this together to get this to the Board of Public Education. And I think the next piece that's really critical timing wise is then this goes to the Ed Interim Budget Committee for them to also see. And so it's during the interim year. So they also need to take a look at this information, because they want to be sure that the changes that are being taken on don't have what is really that impact to our schools on the finance side. So it's an important process. It's really that piece that comes towards the end, but critical to kind of get a widespread view of how that happens in the schools. So thanks, Marie.
Yes, thank you, Julie. All right, so with that, we're going to take a quick break. I have 10 minutes on there, but we're cruising through, so I want to give you guys the opportunity. We will likely be done earlier than our anticipated time today, which is just fine for all of us, I'm sure. So why don't we change that to a 5-minute break? Come back at 9:10, and when we come back, I want you to have the opportunity to share what questions do you have, what do you want to go back on, what slide do you want to review again to make sure you truly understand your role in the process. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, and I'll see you very soon.
Thanks, Marie. I'll be right back.
You can ask the questions that you have. All right.
Marie, I'm here, but no camera.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, your image isn't or your box isn't popping up either. So thank you for that, Lynn.
Is my box This is Brooke. Is my
Yep.
box?
Brooke, I can see you. I can see Carolyn. I can see Kathy, and I can see our Katrina too. And now, Carrie, you're not frozen anymore, so that's good. At least you froze in a nice way. It never works out that way for me. Okay, we'll give one more minute here so that we can get anyone. All right. I believe we have most people with cameras back on, so we can have the opportunity now. I want to make sure that you get a really good gist of what this means, what the work is. So what do you need clarified, and what further questions do you have about the general process? And I'm going to go around the virtual room here and see if anyone has any insights on things that they learned that they still need clarified, those pieces. So Brooke,
Yes.
what do you still want to know about the process?
Actually, I really feel like I understand the process. And the thing that keeps coming to my mind as a grandmother and having been a parent is waiting to see how it interacts with parents.
That's a great question.
I mean, I've got a specific question, but that, as far as what we're doing, I'm fine.
Thank you, Brooke. And as we go through this, please stop us and ask questions along the way about how parents were considered in this. Thank you. Carolyn, what questions do you have about this process or things that you need cleared up?
Thank you. I think I understand the process, and right at the moment, I don't have any questions, but probably later I will.
That's just fine.
Thank you.
Things come up as we go through things. Carrie, how about yourself?
I'm kind of in the same boat as Carolyn and Brooke. Like it makes sense, but until we start applying it, may run into some questions then. But I've been through some other things with consensus and I really like it. So it's a good process.
Wonderful. Good. All right. I have now Dr. Lynn Ryder, how about yourself?
I don't have a lot of questions. I'm really interested in seeing how we all mesh together, especially when I look at our school board member, our taxpayer parents, and then teachers also, because I think we're going to bring very different views to the discussion.
Yes, thank you for that. And then Kathy, you've been through this process once already. Do you have any things you want to share with the committee or questions that you further have of clarification?
I'm glad that I'm going to be a part of this again, because the first one I did, I was pretty ignorant and didn't take advantage of all the stuff that I could know. And what I'm seeing here is when we start talking about math rules, I'm making a trip up to our curriculum director because I want to talk to them about things that I see. Since math is not my specialty, we have a very professional curriculum director. So that's one of the things that I would like to see. But as far as what you've presented this morning, it's very clear to me so far.
Good, thank you. We definitely did some refining since our last round to make this as clear as possible. So I appreciate that feedback. All right.
Marie, I'm just going to add, this is Diane. On top of what Kathy just said, she said she's going to go and talk to somebody, which I love, because that's the purpose of what we're doing here, is to connect people to the work. And it just brings to mind that everything that you're going to show them today here in this orientation can be seen by everyone in the public. And so when Kathy talks about, I'm going to go talk to this person, the person she's talking about can also look at this information and see it for themselves as we're going through the process and what's already happened along the process with working with the math content standards.
Thank you for that, Diane. Yes, and along the way, all of these recordings will be posted. So even if you want clarity for yourself and need something explained again, if you're an auditory learner, I know that might help out. And with having gone through this before, we have learned quite a bit about how to present this information for clarity and transparency of the whole process, and just so that everyone really has the opportunity to understand the deep inner workings without having to do the days and days and days of writing work. So with that, we know that we needed to do more in terms of sharing what the task force did for us as committee members, as task force members, and the research that they reviewed together, the conversations they had, even before we get to look at what the standards are. We are going to really share with you the process, and just so you can see the rationale behind the decisions. So with that, I wanted to share with you where the current standards are within the OPI website, so that you can look at them and reflect on them. Now, they were last adopted, hi Tina, I'll introduce you in a moment, in 2011, and this was aligned to the Common Core that was adopted almost nationwide, with a little bit of changes, including Indian Ed for All integration, which is something we'll discuss later, but a mandate in the state of Montana to be involved in content standards. And here you'll see the different information that you can find about all of those pieces, as well as the ongoing revisions. And I'm going to go to the next slide to show you specifically. If you click on, my apologies. If you click on the button that said Montana Content Standards, you'll see we have different documents for our current standards that are K-12, so a big comprehensive, I think it's 64-page document. Kindergarten, first grade all the way through, as well as some appendices, how high school's laid out, the mathematical practices, different model pathways, and the K-8 standards progression, so you can see that vertical alignment component. Now, those are the guidance documents that OPI puts together based on rule. When we say rule, we're talking about ARM, Administrative Rule of Montana, ARM. I didn't even know that ARM existed as an educator in Montana for more than a decade until I got into rulemaking. I always utilize the guidance documents that are put out by OPI that align with ARM. But I think it's necessary for you to know where the difference is in our work. So what we are tasked with, or you as negotiated rulemaking committee, is approving the proposed changes to ARM. That includes these 1053-501. So when we read that, that means chapter 10. Oh, sorry. 10 is our education. 53 is the chapters of content standards. And then we are in the subchapter 5, which is specific to math content standards. As we look through here, you'll see these are our active standards because they have this right here. If you're looking through any other form of ARM or any other subchapter, you'll see repeal or this image of a piece of paper, which shows that this is the latest and active version of that. You'll see each grade level here, as well as mathematical practices, those pieces. So you'll see that this aligns with the guidance documents that were put forth by OPI at that time. Do you have any questions? I will drop these links in there in just a moment for you to review also, but we're going to continue through this work. But again, always raise your hand or interrupt me if you have questions. I don't want you to be, wait, I didn't quite get that. So where we are in our timeline, we've had a lot of work beginning in October of 22, so a full year ago in terms of research and review and then revision, and we are now at the negotiated rulemaking stage, and these rules actually have quite a bit longer to go in until they are fully in the hands of districts and implemented for our students. Now, the first part of that, as you saw, was research and review, and we want you to know that the research was some internal research. What do we want as an agency with our superintendent in the lead, but also like what is the evidence-based research about math instruction and math standards that is the most up to date. And with that, we use a regional educational laboratory program, and we are in that Northwest laboratory. So we call it the REL Northwest. You'll hear RELNW or see that, REL Northwest. And so we gave them specific questions about what we wanted to pursue and review for our task force members. And so the focus of those, I go into detail later in this if we want to go down that road, but the focus of that research is early numeracy and number sense. So what does that mean for our early learners? The process standard, so the method students use as they solve problems. This is also in relation to the mathematical practices. So whether it's problem solving, modeling, thinking abstractly, representing those different pieces. And then we had a great interest in the math pathways for our high school students and seeing what did the research say about what's most appropriate for our high school learners in comparison to the traditional pathways that we have set forth, or if that's correct and what we should be doing. Now, one thing we learned with our last negotiated rulemaking process is we really wanted to share the expertise of our task force. We had incredible individuals that went through a vetting process in order to be selected for the task force. And I can tell you, it was an amazing experience to watch these individuals work. I'll introduce Tina Blair if she's ready. She is one of our task force members who was able to join us today to just share a little bit about the process. And then we also have Fred Peck. So Tina, don't feel like you need to go into detail at all here. I have lots of slides, but throughout I might pull the two of you in to add a little bit more. So Tina, do you want to share about yourself?
Just a moment. Before Tina goes, Marie, I wonder if this would be a really good time to just create some clarification so that people understand that this really is just informational, provides some information about history, as opposed to getting into discussion or conversations around the content. And I just wonder if you want to create some clarity so
Thank you,
that
Diane.
you betcha.
Yeah, so Fred and Tina, we are not going to go into the details of what you wrote at this point. It's just the processes that we went through and the research and the grounding information that we did. So Fred and Tina, if you don't mind, we'd love for you to introduce yourself and kind of share what that process was like for you.
Sure. Okay, I'll go just so we don't have too many awkward silences. Hey, everybody. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm sorry I joined so late, but yeah, it's great to see you all. I'm Fred Peck. I'm a math education professor at UM in the math department. And yeah, I guess the process was basically like I'm sorry if this has already been said, I just joined, but
you joined at the perfect time. Perfect. We just started.
All right, we just convened for, we had a virtual sort of orientation session, I think kind of like what's going on right now, where we reviewed some research that was put together for us by education consulting company that OPI hired. That research was really helpful. It basically described sort of like the guideline, the recommendations and guidelines for curriculum and standards post Common Core. So what states have done and what researchers have recommended and what professional organizations have recommended about standards based post Common Core. That really helped us. So anyway, we had that virtual meeting where we went over research. We also went over and looked at some exemplary states just to get a sense of what other states have done with their revisions post Common Core. And then we met for 3 days in person where we did a little bit of sort of whole group. So in person, every grade band was there together. We did some whole group stuff where we learned more about Indian education for all and best practices for Native American students. We reviewed the research again and talked about like what kind of competencies and knowledge and skills modern students need to have to be college and career ready. And then we spent a good, day, 2 days, probably day and a half, day and 3/4, just writing standards. So looking at the old standards and thinking about how we could respond to Superintendent Hartson's call to make them more practical, more simple, and more clear. I think those were her 3, but something along those lines. Yeah, so then we just spent most of our time together doing that. At the end of that time, we hadn't really, at least my grade band, which was 912, we hadn't really finished everything we wanted to finish. So we met a number of times over the intervening months to continue working on the standards. We also got really good feedback from a review team and we responded to that feedback. And I think we're still in some rounds of review on that. But anyway, I think that's was what the process looked like from my perspective.
Thank you for that. We appreciate you being with us today, Fred. Tina, were you still there? Did you want to share anything else? She might have had to jump out. All right. So yes, like he said, we had a big old process. I do have it laid out. He did a wonderful summary, so I'm glad I'm accurate in all of that. But when it came to selecting it, we had everyone had to submit their resume, had their professional qualifications, if they had standard revision experience. So what was unique is we did have some members that were on the 2011 task force that also joined us for this. So we had that contextual and historical experience of, hey, this is why that decision was made, and now we know this, which was really, really helpful to the process. Also, they ranked themselves on their general knowledge of the standards, mathematical practices, Indian education for all, and I'll go into what those things are if you have questions about mathematical practices. If that's not in your vocabulary bank yet, I'll make sure that we review that here soon. The Indian Education for All, we'll talk about that more, integration, early numeracy, high school mathematics, and expertise with population. So it was very intentional, and these are the research questions we're asking, and this is what we want to know from our committee members also, as our task force members, as they join in this work. The applications were reviewed by internal, external stakeholders. As math is a pretty popular, obviously, area, we had a lot of applications, and it was hard to narrow down to who would be on this, and we're really excited about the composition of the teams because we had in-classroom teachers. We had people like Fred who are at the higher education level that have those high schoolers coming to him. We had administrators, instructional coaches, a great deal of professional development providers across the state that really just had wonderful things to contribute to the conversation so that when we were thinking through the standards, we thought about it from all perspectives, as well as several of them being parents as well. We had 4 development teams to break up the work, K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 12. And then we'll talk about the process and how that flowed to the review teams. So like Fred said, we did start similarly to this with task force introductions and then orientation, where we began the dive into the research. And then in July, we had those wonderful days where we sat at the Capitol. We really dug into the research a lot more to make sure that we were aligned with the work as we started revising the standards. We continued having several together meetings, subcommittee meetings, and separate as well. And then we went into the development and vertical consistency, and we are really right there. We're at the finalizing pieces. They are not done today because we want to honor the work that the task force is doing, the review team's feedback. We want to make sure that we give it all the consideration that we need so that when it comes to you in November, you have a full comprehensive package, not only what the proposed standards are, but the rationale behind those, because there's a lot of wonderful decision-making happening at that level that it will now come to you for the next level of decision making. When Fred mentioned, we had 2 different organizations support us in that, and those are both federally supported. We do not have to pay for those as an organization. One was the Rail Northwest that we said earlier, and then we also had facilitation from the Region 17 Comprehensive Center. So this is also a federally provided support that helps facilitate the process. They do this with the other states nearby us. We had 2 individuals who were in person with us for writing. They've been moderating the work as we go and collaborating with us and making sure that we're following research and sharing best practices and just having another form of facilitation so that we know that the work being done is true to everybody. In that orientation, we introduced one another, we reviewed the process, the research, and we actually took other state standards, like Fred said, and even British Columbia, and we analyzed them very deeply to see what do we like, what do we not like, how do we find simplicity, clarity, and practicality when we dig into these. And it was fun to see like, oh, that's way too long, don't like that. Oh, this is nice and simple and clean and neat, or just different formatting and structures. And so that when you look at it as a parent as these standards, it's not in a foreign language and it is clear, and it's also accessible for teachers who are planning their day-to-day instruction. With the priorities of the development, we talked about simplicity, practicality, and clarity. We wanted these standards to be read by anyone who is accessing them, whether they're a math instructor, whether they are a parent or a grandparent at home trying to help their 4th grade grandchild on standard 4.08.6 and yeah, all the things, just so that they can say, what is this asking my child to know and do? Because content standards are what should the students be able to know and do. Practicality, making sure that we focus on the learning goal in that specific domain, that it's not stretched out too far. And then clarity, making sure that they're very, very clear. One thing, with simplicity, really streamlining and trying to bring down the duplication of standards and really going, oh, this is actually encompassed here, here, and here, and we can bring it into this one standard statement instead. And we also had discussions about the early numeracy, the trajectory of development when it comes to that process for our early learners, data science, financial literacy, IFA integration, and pathways for high school. So when I say data science, we'll talk you'll see a little bit about where the committee went with that, because we really identified pieces of data science, which is when we analyze data as real world consumers, as well as in professions that now really that's a big chunk of their work, and that's analyzing large sets of data and understanding the trends in those data. Financial literacy was a key interest because it was just passed to include it in our graduation requirements for Montana learners. So our now sophomores, when they graduate, they will be required to have a half credit of financial literacy. And it is covered across different standards, whether it's NRC TE standards and math standards. So we had those discussions about where that would be important. With our in-person writing, 3 days, we had our Indian Ed for All specialists come in, and our culture and language specialist, Matt Bella, who I think is on the call also today. And they did a phenomenal job, truly like one of those goosebump jobs of just saying like how important this work is and the inclusion of IFA and how well it could be done. And I can tell you the task force took that very, very intentionally, and it, in fact, made sure that when decisions came, when we were integrating IFA, that they weren't done just on the task force, that we had some other eyes on it, including our IFA team and other tribal members across the state. We really deep dove into that research. They jumped out into their grade bands and really dug into the pieces of, okay, this is our grounding. This is what we need to know. How is it going to affect our work? And then the mathematical practices, we had a subcommittee that volunteered to look at those. Currently, we have 8 mathematical practices in Montana, and there's a lot of different revisions out there. We're not going to go into the details of those right now, but the mathematical practices, that subcommittee came up with a proposal that was then approved by everybody else throughout the development team on some really unique language to ensure that we're thinking about how students do their learning. And then, like I said earlier, the structure and format. We'll talk more about that when we get to the next step. And that includes like condensing language, where we want elaborations, where we want the examples and those pieces. Now, the development team joined us to share with the review team, here's what we were thinking, here was our work, here's the rationale behind why we did this. And then also, here's some questions we want you to specifically look at as a review team, and the proposed math practices as well. Fred has been along the ride for both of these back and forth sessions, so I appreciate that he's here also. But making sure that it was a real back and forth, because as we go through this, the development team they're developing the standards, and the review team is giving feedback throughout the process, and they have access to the documents throughout. And so we want to make sure that we have that second set of eyes really looking at all the pieces and how they work together. Then we had other extra time with the math practices that is decided K-12, that is a consistent piece across all of them. And then each standard by grade band, they went in and went standard by standard by standard. Okay, we're 2 more, and then I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. We'll ask some questions. With the integration of IFA, we had a few tribal members that were nominated by our IFA team to say, hey, will you look at this? Not only are you tribal representatives, but you are also mathematic educators. And they gave us feedback on how the committee was proposing to integrate it in a new and different way than what had been done before. You'll see it in math practices, but also across all content standards. And we had a lot of wonderful discussion about having authentic language within that. Then the final review team here will give our feedback to the development team for their last clean and polish. I can tell you, Katrina, our math coordinator, has been coordinating this work so that as they go through it, I mean, it's some messy work. We're taking hundreds of standards and making changes all over. And she's really laid it out so nice for the review team and the development team. And you will see this work come to you. But it is like, here's what it was. Here's what was scratched out. Here's the new proposed. And here's why those decisions were made. And she's doing a wonderful job capturing what the intention is behind the work. Because we at OPI, we're not making these decisions. We are facilitating the work. And also she's put together documents of vertical alignment, a lot of crosswalking to see what was there. And if you look, when we look at the 912 standards, you'll see they changed a lot. And it's some challenging tasks to try to figure out where and how they changed. And along the way, any feedback, of course, we'll take to make sure that you can understand these documents in your work. But I can just want to give her a pat on the back because she just joined us almost 2 months ago. And she has really done so much for this process and making sure it's clear for the development team. So we appreciate her so much, myself in particular. And then one more step before it comes to you all is we are going to share these proposed rules with the Montana Advisory Council on Indian Education, which is, we say MACI, because we want some feedback on how we did with that integration as before it comes to you for negotiated rulemaking. Whew, okay, slide 40. Okay, what general questions do you have about the process? And specifically, we have a few task force members here if Tina's still in the group. And I'll just open it up. You can speak out or raise your hand whenever you want to ask your questions. There's no way I explained it that well. I do have some in the chat. Let me check. Brooke, Kira, you good?
I'm fine. Most of my questions will start after we get into the...
Perfect. Okay, sounds
because
good.
Right now I can't imagine a question.
That's okay. That's great. Good. We just want to make sure that you're understanding once you see this proposed set of rules, all the thought process and the hard work that the task force really put together in ensuring the package they passed on was something that not only they were proud of, but was research and evidence-based and would be something that they as practitioners would use in the field. I had us at another break, but since we're kind of rolling, we're going to continue if you're okay. We just had a little one. If you need to take a break at any moment to take care of your personal matters, please feel free to do that. And again, this recording will be there. Now, this is the point I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on the research. So I have Julie here and I have Fred here also who analyzed that research. At any point, if it's over your head, which I'm not going to act like it is because it's really wonderful how they summarized it and brought it in so that it was very clear for the work at hand. So the 3 different areas we looked at was early numeracy to begin. So the theme 1, what does research identify as the foundational mathematical content that grade pre-K through 5 students need to be successful? And so with this, we were really looking at their development and their initial math knowledge, how they begin with one-to-one correspondence, the subitizing, the algebraic thinking, because even those little kindergartners are using algebraic thinking in their learning, and then building up into mathematical equivalence, and then reasoning related to geometry, space, and patterning. So they gave us a lot of ideas of this is what it should look like in terms of early numeracy. Theme 2, and this will all be shared with you and already has been, so if you want to dive into that, I will also share the research articles with the team. So if they want to dive into those in-depth articles, you absolutely can do that. So what instructional practices are recommended for our early learners to support their mathematical success? Really, we're looking at the assessments for the knowledge gaps and intervention. So those diagnostic pieces for a little so that they can transition through that trajectory appropriately, how to motivate students and really actually have some play-based activities built into those things. So those hands-on pieces with our early learners that are so important, setting clear learning goals, having a balanced student-centered and teacher-directed approaches. So more of that explicit instruction at that younger age balanced with conceptual understanding. Encouraging mathematical discourse. So you'll hear about math talks sometimes with your teachers, and having students really discuss the math is a practice that is evidence-based. using manipulatives and flexible thinking, and incorporating rich problem-solving tasks for our younger students. And theme 3, what is the research evidence related to incorporating cultural diversity in early childhood mathematics education? And really, cultural relevant pedagogy may benefit all learners. So one thing, I believe it was you again, Fred, that he pointed out along the way is we don't want to put necessarily our Western ways of math thinking onto the math standards, and really have them written in a way that could also be viewed at when it comes to other culturally relevant ways and pedagogy, so the instructional practices as well. Incorporating that cultural diversity into every math student so that they can develop their own mathematical identity. So it really getting away from the I'm bad at math verbiage that we hear so many kids saying, that we're going to try to dominate and take that out of all of their vocabulary, because they all have the potential for that. And it's research based, as long as we have that positive mathematical identity. And then they acknowledge that there is more research needed on the integration of culturally relevant pedagogies in early mathematics instruction, which says they haven't done a lot of this research yet. So it's an opportunity for people to look into more. All right, so the process standards. Again, along the way, raise your hand. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will keep rolling to get through this information otherwise. Tina is in here, so I'm going to promote her into a panelist. All right, so process standards, theme 1. How do current standards address the importance of developing and integrating mathematic process standards alongside the content standards? This is the processes students go through as they learn math. So the content is what they know and are able to do, but the process is the problem solving and different strategies that they need in order to apply the math. So it really talked about the routines and norms of habits of the mind, like having those mathematical practices. You'll see that they aren't specific for grade level. They are all encompassing for all learning. And then although the standards for mathematical practice are currently in broad use, so those are aligned with the Common Core, you'll see that the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP standards, show another vision of that and how it has evolved. And our committee members did look at that when it came to what they are proposing for mathematical standards for Montana. All right, so what does the research evidence say about developing conceptual and procedural knowledge in mathematics in relation to process standards? So this is speaking a lot about like teaching kids the algorithms of it versus teaching them the concepts, the conceptual understanding. So really teaching them how to use connecting to visual representations, engaging them with those multiple problem-solving strategies, supporting the mathematical discussions like the math talks that we discussed, giving examples. And actually there's a lot of research to support error reflection. So viewing a math problem that is incorrect and having them have the conversation about how to solve that correctly. And then scaffolded learning with explicit instructional support that gradually fades to encourage independent problem solving. So as we look at our second graders and their problem solving and translation all the way up through, and how they develop those independent skills. Theme 3 focuses on the impact of process standards on equity, particularly in context of American Indian communities. Really, what needs to be done based on the research is supporting educators in directly addressing the issues of race, power, and equity to support their students' learning needs. The research also says that we need to use culturally relevant pedagogies. And so I have some people here actually that have taught on our Indian reservations, and they can speak to this about how making sure that we use culturally relevant pedagogies can really change the classroom for those students and ensure that they have access to the content as well. And then considering their social emotional well-being as we go through also. High school pathways was our third research question. Theme 1, what are the features of the siloed Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 high school mathematics model? So this is the default that many schools, and Montana schools also, they have freshmen doing Algebra 1 if that's where it lands in their pathway, then followed by Geometry, and then Algebra 2. So we wanted to know, what does it tell us about that and the impact and ability to serve a diverse student body, which may or may not be going into post-secondary, but maybe going into career or trades in a different way, or different types of post-secondary. So really, the research findings show that the current model usually consists of less than 4 years. In Montana, the requirement is to have 2 years of mathematics, but the schools must offer a third year of mathematics, which is important to note as you guys are looking at the proposed rules. So requirement is 2 years. You must offer 3. And that many schools, their districts choose to offer more depending on their own policies, but that is the minimum in Montana. It also, the research said the model of having that focus to get all students to Algebra 2 does lead to most students not achieving proficiency or having positive math experiences, ultimately leaving them unprepared for college and career objectives. Moreover, this default approach has unintended and negative consequences for students, teachers, and schools. So that traditional pathway of Algebra 1, Geometry, then Algebra 2, the research is showing that not necessarily positive consequences for all students. I want to say that all, absolutely for some and not for all. And those details and percentages are in that research as well. Theme 2, to what extent are various U.S. stakeholder groups open to and engaging in reform to secondary and post-secondary mathematics pathways reform? So, many professional organizations are acknowledging that there needs to be a change in mathematics and the pathways that are required for students at the high school and post-secondary level. So it's not just us wondering, there's research behind it, and there's also other professional organizations and researchers saying, you know, we need to look at it a different way to see how else we can help all students be successful. And then theme 4, what common high school mathematics practice pathway models and structured are currently being implemented in the US. So we have the siloed mathematical models. So instead of the algebra, geometry, algebra 2, we're starting to see some geometry first and then some geometry and algebra concurrently at the same time, as well as streamlined silos. Streamlined siloed. Oh goodness, Tina, do you remember that part?
Hi there, can you restate the question?
Yes, so when looking at the siloed mathematic models, we had different areas, which are geometry first, then geometry and algebra concurrent, and then streamlined silos. Maybe it would be in the different standards areas, the domains?
Yes, it could be, and that they would maybe have the first few years would be set, and then the branch could be different, but your first few years might not set you up that you're more interconnected and
Perfect.
then better prepared, so yes.
Hey, and sorry, it might be an awkward time, but since I had called you out, Tina, do you want to introduce yourself to our committee members and share about this experience? Fred went through all the details of what we did, but if you want to share your experiences of the process and what you were able to accomplish.
Sure. I'm Tina Blair, and I'm a middle school principal at West Valley in Kalispell. I previously taught 1st and 4th grade and worked as a curriculum coach. Some previous experience, I was worked with ELA standards many years ago, but I'm sure that Fred shared the basics of this, but when we got into the weeds of this process, there really was a lot of discussion on the existing standards, the experience of instruction and the application and the outcomes we were getting with the existing standards, and then reviewing all these other standards and their research, and then thinking, hey, how do we want to apply that to our current with our learners and future learners, and then what that experience would actually look like, and really looking for clarity just for the general citizen of reading them, and then for the clarity of instruction and the experience that that learner would have, and that they would really have a lot of strength coming out of it, really looking for learner strength. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And if at the end, if they probe you with some questions, we'd love to hear more of your inputs about the process and the thinking behind everything. So I appreciate you jumping in with us today and helping us support this work. All right. So also with the pathways, transition courses, course substitutions, and really looking at what else could our junior year or 3rd year, depending on where they are in their own pathway, what else could it look like beyond Algebra 2, which has been the standard path for a long time. And then Indian Education for All. I want to acknowledge that I am not an expert in this, nor am I a tribal member, but I really appreciate and adore that this is a part of our instruction in Montana and is mandated. I think it's absolutely one of the parts that makes Montana unique. And also when we talk about the research on math identity, it's another area for mathematical identity for those learners to see themselves in the learning. And it's the work being done here is incredible. With that, it is constitutionally declared policy of this state to recognize the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians and to be committed in its educational goals to the preservation of their cultural heritage. So what this is saying is we must include this in our content standards and also provide opportunities for our learners to see themselves in it, and also not only our Native American or students, but also non-Indian, as it says, to be encouraged to learn about the distinct and unique heritage of American Indians and the different ways that they count coins and how they map stars across. I've learned so much just through this recent process, and really the task force and continuing guidance documents will be much more, the intent is to be much more authentic in the inclusion and to have those opportunities for students to learn that. So with that, part of Indian Education for All is also ensuring that not only students have the access to that through content standards, but also that all school personnel should have the understanding and awareness of Indian tribes to help them reflect effectively, really effectively with students, Indian students and parents. So as we describe our content standards to all parents, we need to ensure that we have the perspective of our American Indian people within Montana in those conversations as well. All right. With that, what questions do you have about the math content standards, the research, the Indian Education for All? And I know I'm getting some chat, so if I'm not intentionally ignoring you, I'm just trying to focus on, thank you. Someone caught something on that. I will make sure to fix that. Thank you so much. I pulled that right from our IFA piece. All right. What questions do we have? Or wonders?
I have a couple, but I don't.
Okay.
I can't raise my hand.
That's fine. You just speak right out, Brooke.
Okay. I really like, and until, okay, coming from Maryland and moving to Montana, where there is a different breakdown, I am excited, okay, about the fact that how, like, the American Indian views math be explained. And, you know, so, how can I say this? Sometimes things, you know, you're taught things, but you don't know why you're taught them. All right. And like you said, how they count points. I never knew that there was any different way. I mean, you know, that there was a cultural difference in terms of that. So I think that that's something that I'm very impressed that's going to be included. Now, I'm going to wait until we get into the part about, what was it, cultural and inclusiveness before I say anything, because I don't know what that means yet. I know I have a view, and there's some things about it that I am definitely opposed to, but until I do more research, I can't say anything.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us, Brooke. I did want to note, Carolyn noted for us on House Bill 338, which was just passed in recent legislation, the word encourage was removed on that piece of the Indian Ed for All law. So thank you for that, Carolyn. I did not intend to misrepresent that, so I appreciate that feedback. And I do know that as our task force was working, they were very thoughtful about the language tied to the Indian Ed for All integration. So thank you for that. How about in terms of early numeracy research? Any questions on that research or clarifying statements? You don't have to have questions, but I want to make sure that you have the space for them in case you're like, I do not know what that means. Like I said, and Fred saved me in the chat, siloed I was doing great with the research, and then that one came up and I got a little lost, but that's okay. We can't know it all.
Now, you did say that we could have access to the research.
Yes. So we can talk about next steps if it's an appropriate time. I just want to make sure you all have the opportunity to share and ask questions, including what will be shared with you and what you can view in the meantime, okay? So we will hopefully have as many of you as possible, and hopefully the weather contributes to this, but in November, we will be at the Capitol in Helena, which is a wonderful place to do this work. It really brings like the power of the building and the work together in such a way that helps you realize we're doing rulemaking. It's pretty wonderful. So November 14th, we had a 9:30 a.m. start for those of you to travel that morning if you needed to, if it wasn't realistic. We also have hotel blocks that will get all that information to you for you to stay the night before. So the first day will be 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We will be in person at Capitol Room 152. It's right on that main level, and we'll have signs. You'll know we're there. And then the following day, unfortunately, legislators thought they needed the Capitol more than we did. So for the second day, we will be at the OPI offices using their upstairs conference room for our continued work on rulemaking. We did have it a shortened day from 8:30 to 1 p.m. Partially, that is because we have Board of Public Ed and Ed interim committees and things like that we will be partaking in. But also note that we do not know if we will get through all the rulemaking in those 2 sessions. Like we at OPI are not going to determine that, the committee will as we go through the work. So we will be prepared for more either in person or virtual options. As we get closer to those winter months, we will probably try to do virtual if that's what the committee feels comfortable and that feels like they have full access to actively participate in. And trying to give those hybrid options when it's not safe or if you're not able to travel. So if you're not able to be with us in the room, you are part of consensus making regardless if you're on the Zoom. So we'll ensure that you have an active role in that and feel like you are a part of the process. Further logistics. So I will be following up. Sherry Harlow, who's on the call, is our wonderful admin assistant, has a hotel block for you all. All of this will be all of your travel, and then so in terms of mileage as well as per diem for meals will be reimbursed by the agency. We will have that paperwork for you either digitally for you to fill out if you are virtual. Well, no, if you're virtual, you don't need reimbursement. You're not traveling. But if you split it or whatever that looks like, but also the W-9 so that we can track that appropriately. And then with that, our next steps. So like we mentioned earlier, our task force is working really, really hard to ensure they have a pretty document to pass on, which includes those final steps of decisions. So we are finalizing that for the superintendent's review, who she will then go through that, and then those proposals will come to you as the NRC. So we don't meet until November 14th, so we have wiggle room where at minimum, a week ahead of time, you will get that summary document. But in the meantime, I will be sharing other files that just locations where you can see where the work has been and what the research is, like we discussed earlier, so that you have access to that. And all of that is public access. Like we mentioned earlier, if you go to the OPI website, you'll see our landing page, you'll see different documents linked there. And in terms of the work that's been done. All right. And if we finish this meeting 3 hours early, I would be so happy to give you back those hours. But I want to make sure we have Fred here, we have Tina here. Any sharing thoughts, Fred, that you want to make sure that wasn't covered in what you heard that you want to share, Tina or Fred, with the committee?
No, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys. There might be times, well, you guys know you're not done with me. There's more work to be done. So, Brooke, Carrie, Lynn, any other questions that you have or need clarified as we move forward?
No, I just have to do a lot of reading.
You do, and we appreciate that. And if you have questions, ask. But I can tell you, having gone through this process only once myself, that the more prepared you are in terms of going through the documents, especially the summary document that comes, I'm going to tell you that's probably going to be the best way for you to feel like you know what's going on and contribute in your representative role. We want you to fully understand everything. We don't want you to feel like you don't have access to the information, to the research. If you have questions while you're researching that you want to reach out to myself or Katrina, please feel free to ask. We want to make sure that you're understanding every piece and also that we are clear in our presentation.
Yes. I'm just very interested in education, especially since there are areas where, me being an older individual, I remember when the United States was rated much better in educational standards. And it is, I have to say this coming from Maryland, I'm happy with Montana's, what I viewed as Montana's educational standards, all right? But I like to keep abreast to make sure they stay that way. Not that I'm just, I just think that in some areas the students are getting shortchanged. So that's all I have to say.
We're glad to have you serve in your role on this committee, Brooke. Thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for the presentation.
Yes, of course. All right. Well, I never get to give people time back in their day. So with that, you are welcome to leave. We're going to make sure this all gets posted and shared so that you can review certain parts again. And those members that couldn't be here because of prior commitments or scheduled challenges, so that they have full access to the information as well. So we very much appreciate all of you taking the time, not only now, but we'll be hanging out a lot here in the near future. So thanks again. You all have my contact information. It's on the screen, but if you need anything along the way, please let me know. We want to make sure that this is a great process for you because it directly relates to students. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.